my name is Jamie. I live in Saudi Arabia for a couple more weeks and then I move in. And I have a makeup collection that just keeps getting larger. It did just now. I got one thing. I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but it was small and I wanted it and it's here now. If you're new here, hi, welcome. Thanks for stopping by. And here I like to talk about makeup, indie makeup, lots of indie makeup, eyeshadows, big looks, collection discussions. Occasionally I talk about indie makeup releases, things like that. Kind of whatever I want to do when I want to do it, because it's my channel. I'll do what I want with it. If you are returning, thanks for coming back. Please feel free to leave me a comment and chat with me, and let's talk about makeup because it is one of my favorite things. And yeah, today what we're going to be doing is I am actually going to give you a bit of a different video where I give instructions about how to do a cut crease. I am going to assume that my friend who requested the video wanted a step-by-step tutorial-ish on how to do a half cut crease. There's many types of cut creases, as in like you can do a garage door cut crease, you can do a full cut crease, and if you are not new here, you know that I sure do favor a half cut crease because it is 2018 in this house in that regard. Probably only in that regard. But before we get started, a couple of notes. So I have already prepped my eyelids with the NYX Ultimate Shadow and Liner Primer. This doesn't do a lot to block out kind of the natural pigments of my eye, so it's not necessarily my favorite, but it does give me a sticky base for eyeshadow. And for me, I do prefer to use eye primers as opposed to concealers, especially when it comes to cut creases. The reason being is that a concealer I have had in the past be a little gummy and they don't dry down quick enough and shadow doesn't stick quite right to it. But if you are not in the mood to go out and get an eye primer, especially like a brighter one, lighter one, in order to do a cut crease, it's not a big deal. You can just get a concealer that is a bit lighter. And if it's especially like a bit drier, like maybe it's too dry to use on your under eyes, that's a good candidate for cut crease medium. I have been known to do that in the past. I will say that I think concealers are maybe a little bit more forgiving in the beginning if you are new to doing cut creases, so consider that, but they may move around. It depends on your eye type and if you have oily eyes. Some other things to note before we get started are brushes. So I have a few dedicated cut crease brushes. This, for instance, is from Be Perfect. This is the BPE 19, and as you can see, it has a very rounded edge. And this is pretty good for cutting creases, and it's very thin, very thin, you see. So it's easy to load product up and then just go. As well, I have a couple of others. This is a Made by Mitchell dedicated cut crease brush. This is an MENC, I can't tell. It's like Roman numerally writing. That doesn't make sense, but whatever. MC5 or whatever, same idea. This isn't my favorite cut crease brush, honestly, because it's a bit too thick, in my opinion. Do you see that? One other brush that I really like, and is probably my favorite for cutting creases, is the BPD03 from Be Perfect. This is thin enough but big enough that it is very quick, very fast. You really just need that edge that you can just go. The bigger the brush you have, the faster you can cut your crease, but the less precise you are. If you don't want to go out and buy a more expensive brush, that's not a big deal. You can use something small, just like this. It must just have this rounded edge. This isn't my favorite one because, again, it is a little bit thicker, but it would work, certainly. Where's another one? Anything that is a bit thinner with a rounded edge could potentially work. It just depends on kind of your skill, your feel, how you prefer to handle the brush. Like I said, I kind of prefer at this point in time a dedicated cut crease brush, so that's just my preference. Things to note as well, I again prefer to use a primer that is going to be a lighter shade. So for instance, I have the iPrep Eye Primer in shade 1 and it's really light. Another thing that would work, for instance, is like color bases, as in maybe the P. Louise color bases. I have the Beauty Creations color bases, and this is in the shade Whiteout, for instance. It doesn't have to be white, but it just has to be lighter. And then yeah, I mean, you can do a lot. You've seen me like maybe cut my crease with this purple one, all kinds of things. Like you can cut creases with tons of stuff. Again though, it is easier to use a dedicated eye primer for the purpose of cutting creases at a certain point. I am going to show you a couple of techniques. There's some that I don't like personally, but will show you anyway. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. I'm probably going to do like one technique on each eye just to make it snappy. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using the Playing and Makeup by Yolanda 5-pan palette. This is Faith. And I'm going to start first in this darkest shade. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a half cut crease, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pack that darkest shade on my outer V of my eye. So both methods, or yeah, the methods I'm going to be using are kind of the same to begin with, and then we move on and I'll show you what I mean. So it's very important to not just pack the darkest shade on the outer corner, but then start to drag it in a little bit in your crease. So the reason we would cut our creases is, first of all, to give more space to put more shadow on. So cutting creases is a drag technique that, again, was utilized to open up the eye because men typically have smaller, like more heavier eyes, like heavier set eyes, maybe like a heavier brow. And the ability to cut your crease, like if you block out your brow, for example, redraw your crease, then you have much more eye space to put eyeshadow on. As well, if you have hooded eyes, cutting your crease is bread and butter, usually, because it will automatically give you more space on your eye to work with. As usual, this is nothing new. You've seen me do this 100 million times. Then I would take the second darkest shade, or the next shade that I would use, and start buffing it through my natural crease and a little bit above. And you don't really need to worry about what's going on in here. Anything, oh shoot, I just totally messed up. Anything below your crease or where you think you're going to cut your crease doesn't really matter because you have a lot of options there to clean it up. So here we are on this eye, and you can see I'm kind of bringing that darkest shade in to even the corner of my eye. It's very good to get at least some pigment kind of further in, because that's going to kind of almost make your cut crease look a bit more natural. And always, to me, always try to keep your eyes open as you're blending, if you can help it, especially like if you know you're going to cut your crease. Because like I said, anything below that line that you're going to cut doesn't really matter. So one thing you can do, this is the point at which I would generally cut my crease. Well, I may go into my third shade, my lighter shade, and for this case it's this one. Then I would kind of get the outer part of my eye as blended out as I could. And if you lose a little depth on the outer corner, it's not a big deal. Just kind of let your eyeshadow sit a little bit, and then you have a chance to go back in later. Okay, so one thing you can do before you even start to cut your crease is you can take off the eyeshadow where you're going to cut your crease and give yourself a very clean line. So I've wetted like a Q-tip with some micellar water. There's a lot of other things you can use, like makeup wipes if you want, and you can start to map out the shape that you want before you even start cutting your crease. And sometimes it's easier, I don't know. Which one should I do? I'm gonna do this one. So especially if I do a really bold look with a lot of, especially non-complementary colors that aren't gonna blend together at all, just for contrast, I may take off the shadows I start with, like this. And you also kind of want to find your natural crease and go above it. So if you have very hooded eyes, like the world's your oyster, really, you can just decide where your crease goes. It's when you have kind of half hood that you have to make decisions. So I like to go generally just past the iris of my eye. So you can see there, I've left some space. And then I would let that dry. And I'll show you on the other side one method that I don't really use. I don't think it looks that good. But the first thing to think about is that don't skimp on your eye primer when you're cutting. So a big mistake that people make is that and what I've made in the past too, is that I'm afraid of getting too much eye primer out. It's fine. So this is kind of a beginner friendly method. You just line your eye, the lower part of your eye, with quite a bit of your primer, and then look up. It won't even work. You gotta even put a lot on, evidently. Come on. See, you can tell why I don't like this. Come on. And I'll be honest, this is an eye that's easier for me to do. So, oh God, oh God. Okay, so ignoring the fact that I really messed up, do you see how I got primer on my eyelashes and then just trying to make it happen? Do you see that line? That's the line that I would follow to cut my crease. So I just start and try to connect it up. So why don't I like that method? Well, it's obvious, it's messy. I think it doesn't give you good practice of how to make a really sharp line either. I think and again, it's not sitting correctly above my crease, it's kind of sitting in my crease. So I'm gonna have to go back and fix it anyway. But if you're a beginner and you're just kind of experimenting, you can use it as a guide and then go from there. Again, for me, I just think the shape of my eye doesn't really work with this method. I'm just as well off doing it myself. And then I just kind of feather out that edge, try to clean up the line a little bit. So there you can see, as I'm looking forward, you can see the cut of my eye. Where it was before, it was too low. It just kind of looked like it was sinking back into the fold of my eye. So that's kind of why I don't do that method. I think it's fine if you do, but it A, doesn't work on me, and B, if you ever want to do makeup professionally, you kind of can't rely on doing that. You have to draw it. So even still, I shouldn't really be resting my hand on my face to study it. This is just me. I'm gonna freehand it. So I kind of put a bunch of product in the front and then sweep it back. And I'll just use that edge of the brush to follow. And I don't always cut it out with micellar water first. See how much faster that was for me? And just look, it's fine. See, this is still not even right. Yep, it's still not right. You see how it is lower on this side than on this side? That's why I don't do it this way. Overall, this side is easier for me to draw, but still. And then what I like to do is I like to pat it out. I may even pat it out with my finger and let it dry. Let this edge be kind of feathered. And then I might like clean up my brush or something. It's also good to get the product off of your brush, so get some micellar water and take it off, which I'm gonna go do. I'll be right back. It's really important to let your crease dry. Again, I'll maybe even like kind of pat it out with my finger and make sure that the product is smooth, just carefully. And you see how feathered out this side is versus this side? Because I kept having to fix it. The more you kind of have to go in and fix and redraw, the kind of more like feathered out it looks at the end, but it's not like it's a crime. It's not like I'm gonna die, but still. So then what I like to do a lot of the time, is I like to re-intensify my outer corner with that darkest shade, and then I start kind of my blend, and meanwhile like my cut crease is drying, so I'll take that darkest shade and kind of bring it in again. I can conceal kind of the fact that I'm maybe a little bit bad at liner, for instance, by bringing that darkest shade more and more in. Then I can take, for instance, my shimmer shades, and I like to start at the front and go back. So, for example, any lighter shade, any shimmer shade, any lightest shimmer shade, I'm gonna start and put it up at the front. So here we go. Again, kind of on a rounder brush. And I just start putting it on the front. And I'll even kind of set it a little bit back, just so it blends into that darkest spot a little bit, but up at the top, not at the bottom. I'm sorry, these are probably really silly explanations, but I kind of want to leave the circular pokey outy part of my eye bare to put a different color on. Again, to kind of create that contrast, to create a bit of, I don't know, depth, like bringing the eye a little bit forward. So that's kind of how I would do that first lighter shimmer shade. Then I'll go into the darker shimmer and just put that down lower and blend. Okay, So here's where we're at in the eye, and I'm gonna jump off camera, finish the rest of my makeup, and when we come back, you'll see the finished look, and I'll give you an outro of my thoughts. All right, so here's the finished look. Here are my cut creases, as you can see. So if you're able to notice, this is much sharper than this one, again, probably because I was able to freehand this and kind of use the product in such a way that I just ended up making an even line. This is a little furry, but again, it's not like you could tell unless you got right up in my eye. In my opinion, being able to cut your crease and show that skill can really, really demonstrate a lot of polish on your makeup. It can really enhance your eye look by quite a lot, and you can start to experiment with more things. And I almost sort of feel like being able to cut your crease is sort of the first step into getting into way more dramatic makeup. And it does take a lot of practice, and it's easy to get frustrated, but just honestly, just keep trying. Don't scrimp on your cut crease medium and try to work on it freehand. I know that's not what everybody says, but that's what I say. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time.